Welcome to the Artist Talk. This talk accompanies the exhibition that is happening in our Great Hall Gallery. At eye level, you will see the exhibition Janna Ahrndt Does Not Dream of Labor. Janna Ahrndt is a new faculty member in the art department, and she's sitting next to me right here. And a little bit about her. Janna is unable to focus, and her medium-agnostic art practice seems to reflect that fact, often making work utilizing creative coding, videos, textiles, and altered household electronics. Born to a working-class family in northern Indiana, their work follows themes of labor, the internet, politics, and gender. Janna received their MFA in electronic and time-based art from Purdue University in 2019 and is currently an assistant professor at the University of Southern Maine, where they reside in a tiny house with their partner and menagerie of pets. Their latest fascination post-pandemic is contemplating the ways the internet and machine learning are shaping death and dying rituals and mourning culture. Janna's research and artwork has been exhibited in spaces such as the International Symposium of Electronic Art, the Science Gallery in Dublin, Ireland. Was it Dublin? Yeah.
It was the real Dublin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Melbourne, Australia, and recently at Fubar Glitch Art Festival. Also accompanying us today is a creative collaborator and fellow artist, Christine Bruening. Christine is an interdisciplinary artist whose work investigates the relationship between popular culture and the cultural values embedded in entertainment. Her practice involves collecting, recontextualizing, and juxtaposing familiar media artifacts to prompt new ways of thinking about what we consume and why. Drawing from media studies, she explores how entertainment shapes collective memory, identity, and desire. Christine holds a BFA in sculpture from Penn State University and an MFA from the University of Michigan. She has exhibited and presented her work both nationally and internationally, engaging audiences through critical reflection and playful visual strategies. I always feel a little odd sometimes when I read bios and I just then proceed with questions because you might not know who I am. So just to give you a brief background on me, I'm the Director of Art Exhibitions and Outreach here at the university. I run both this gallery here in the Crewe Center and our gallery in Gorham. And I also oversee an Artist in Residence program here and a Visiting Artist program. I hold a BFA in Art History from the Maryland Institute College of Art and a Master of Arts in Modern and Contemporary Art History, Theory, and Criticism from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So now that we know our bona fides, I have some questions for the two of you. So you co-created this one piece out there called Digital Sentiment Server, and you have jointly written a paper on its genesis. Can you tell the audience a bit more about that process, where the impetus for the idea came from, what you each contributed, and what its future will be?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And thank you for having us here to talk to you guys. I teach at Louisiana State University now, and one of the projects that we were doing is scanning Michoud rocket facility for NASA, which is so outside of my comfort zone as a weirdo fine arts person. And so a lot of the people that we were collaborating with for this visualization project had lots of very kind of like hard edge business ideas about the project. And I just was yearning for a way to make it feel more human and personal and using that technology in a way that felt more interesting to me. And so I started to think about my grandmother, who was 100 years old, and how her memory was getting worse because she's allowed. And I was thinking about all the stories that were potentially being lost. And so I wanted to create a digital archive for my family, kind of as an act of kin work, but also thinking of new ways that we are trying to kind of maintain these heritages. And so Janna is my really cool HTML friend. And so I reached out with this idea. And then Take it from there, Jen.
So yeah, we were both like, as a coincidence, which seems to happen frequently in our work, we as collaborators met actually at Indiana University, and we just found that we had a lot of similarities in our artistic practice and like how we feel about art making in general. And so we kind of latched on to each other, I think, and because friendships in academia can be very rare. And like, I was also considering this idea of digital heritage. I do a lot of internet research, and so I had been working a lot on different projects considering how all of these platforms that we use on a daily basis, whether they're owned by like Meta or Elon Musk or whatever, they have very particular legal language about how things can be preserved and shared once someone has passed, right? And so I was coming at this from like an internet sociological perspective, where I was really interested in this idea of digital ephemera and what is important and unimportant after somebody has passed. And I think I texted you that, like, this is what it's like to be my friend. I texted her like late at night where I was just like, when your husband dies, what is important for you to keep? Like, what would you be interested in? And I think you responded saying that you were way more like precious about the text conversations between like your SMS text conversations than his like public facing Instagram profile or something. And so like this got me really thinking about like, okay, when someone passes, there's all this material objects that we get to decide what is important and unimportant. But what happens now that we're living in such a digital culture? Who owns the digital ephemera? And also, how do we decide what is important and unimportant in a digital space when people die? So I was thinking about that from like a digital ephemera perspective, but then Christine was thinking about this from like a physical heirloom perspective, especially as a sculptor. And so, yeah, we kind of like combined these two projects together since they were kind of facing the same conceptual framework, but still coming at it from our two different perspectives.
And I think there's a macro micro thing that appeals to me looking at it from a broader picture and then thinking about the very personal as well.
Yeah. So part of it too is like we both have this like whether you like a low aesthetic sensibility of like the DIY culture and allowing people to do things for themselves and have more determinism in their digital spaces. And so, yeah, I think that's
we
part
love
of it.
bad taste.
Yeah, we love bad taste
Yes.
and bad things. So, so that's part of it too.
I think aesthetic has to follow concept, and it sounds like it does.
Yes.
So your practices seem to overlap in the realm of domesticity, but I feel like in very different ways. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about why that area of focus is important to you.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Okay, yeah. So I actually in grad school became really interested. I started my academic career as a sociolinguist, so I've always been deeply rooted in like humanities and humanities research and humanities thinking. And so I have always been really fascinated with this concept of technology in domestic space as like being there to liberate feminine labor from the household, but it also seems that there's this constant cycle of creating more work for yourself as well. Like I think about this a lot, like with some of my pieces that are in the gallery, like a lot of them are these technologies that had these promises of like simplifying your labor, and then it generates this culture where we also feel more pressure to constantly have like a clean, immaculate space, especially with like Instagram culture and like clean girl culture and like all of that stuff.
Also vacuums.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Also vacuuming, which has also been really interesting. But yeah, so I was kind of coming at it from like a technologist perspective of like this false promise of less labor that never seems to come, because the more time that you might have that you might think that would get used towards labor ends up getting used to do more labor instead. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective.
So also in grad school, COVID happened, and then I found out I was pregnant. But my art practice at the time and still was looking a lot at horror movies. And the thought that I had to myself is, well, horror has a lot to say about being a mom. And so I was like, all right, we're doing this. And then I was living in shutdown with my husband in Pittsburgh in our house. And so I was thinking a lot about the role of the house in horror, thinking about the house as something that you live inside, kind of like there was a baby living inside of me. And thinking about all these, layers that are a part of that narrative. Also thinking about domesticity when thinking about the house in horror. The killer always gets in the house, but that's where the woman's supposed to be. So what does that tell us about society? What does the killer always getting into the house make us think about the American dream and the dream of home ownership? And how do millennials feel about ownership, since it feels like kind of a distant, unattainable goal now?
Yeah. Well, and like blaming the mother for the monster as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like I heard such two different threads there, and I think my next question kind of gets at this. Janna, I think that you often employ humor as a means of disarming your audience, as a means of kind of poking fun at technology and the ways that it purports to make our life easier. While Christine, as you just mentioned, you often utilize horror in your practice. So both are kind of a means of getting at deeper truths. And I'm wondering what each of you might have to say about the tonal approaches to your work and how they might overlap and where they disconnect. And I know you answered a little bit, Christine, but if you can elaborate at all.
You had shared these questions with us earlier. Sorry to peek back. But we thought it was a really interesting question because I think a lot of horror is so funny and so camp. And there's a piece that we collaborated on kind of retroactively. We have a piece in a show in Louisiana where I have a collection of videos that I did in grad school before me and Janna knew each other of women looking out of windows in horror movies, because that's just a classic thing that happens. A concerned woman is looking out of a window. And I kind of know when it's going to happen in a movie too at this point. I've watched so many. So I just created a series of these moments in movies as a way to kind of ask the question of what does this piece of media tell us about what we believe about women, safety, the house, all these things. And Janna made kind of the opposite piece.
Yeah. So it was kind of funny. Like one of the pieces that we bonded over when we first met too was this piece of a compilation of appropriated scenes from horror movies of women looking worried out of windows. And then I was like, oh, that's so weird, because I have a piece that I created, which was a series of appropriated clips from films from sex comedies of men peeping, peeping Toms peeping. And so it's kind of interesting. This question forced us to have this conversation about how to me, horror feels comedic to you. And to me, growing up in a household with all boys and surrounded in a very masculine culture, I kind of viewed these comedies as horrific in a way, because I was often the only femme person in that space. And so it was kind of coming at things from opposite perspectives, where I was seeing the horror in comedy and you were seeing the comedy in horror, I guess. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, if that makes sense. But I feel like we're both silly.
Yeah, we were talking about critical silliness, right before we came in the room.
Yeah,
I think it's such an interesting idea of being silly is important and really interesting, and I don't know.
Yeah, and hard to do, in academic art spaces when everything is supposed to be taken so seriously.
Yeah.
I think there's a real importance in taking yourself less seriously as almost a political act.
Yeah, I think it was how we smash the patriarchy is by
It's silliness.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
This isn't as serious as you're making it.
So I'm just wondering, what do you feel that silliness does for the viewer? How does it help them enter your artwork or get at the concepts that you want to communicate?
Well, I guess the way that I always think about it as an invitation to the party is important to me in work in terms of accessibility. That's why I think media is a really interesting medium to use in art, because sometimes people just, I don't know, don't feel invited to the party of contemporary art. And so, if we're just being silly.
Yeah, and I think I do a very similar thing. Like, I grew up in a household where, like, my dad was this staunch Republican who worked in a factory, but, like, wasn't part of a union. And then my grandfather was, like, this, like, diehard Democrat who was, like, a leader in the electricians union. And so I grew up, like, in a household where, like, these really difficult political conversations were happening all the time, and they weren't, like, off limits. It was just something that you, like, constantly were battling about, even though, like, you could still come together and, like, watch The Simpsons afterwards or whatever. But, like, and so I kind of grew up in this household where the delivery of those conversations was important, I think. And I think I kind of learned that, like, comedy as a way to start conversations from a place where, like, I'm not telling you that what you think is, like, wrong in a way that feels bad. Like, we're entering the conversation in a place where, like, something is funny to both of us. So, like, there's a shared sense of culture there that is an entryway to have really difficult conversations. So I think, like, to me, there's a humanity in being funny and being silly that allows people to have, like, way deeper conversations than you would expect.
I'm also just wondering, I feel like you're very right about how fine art often precludes humor, or, like, you're not supposed to find something funny, or if you do find it funny, you're not understanding it.
Right.
You're not understanding it in the right way.
Yeah.
And I do feel like there's something to be said about the way we interact with art in these refined spaces where you're not supposed to have fun or find humor, and it creates this disconnection unless you can have a sort of, like, intellectual moment with the art.
Yeah, and I think, like, the humor allows you to, like, take a step back out of, like, the seriousness of the setting and kind of, like, critically examine. Like, I feel like you're at a better place to critically examine things, especially if you're, like, coming at something that's more political, if you've already laughed about it, because, like, instead of coming at it from, like, an emergency sensibility, you're coming at it from, like, a more open-minded place. And so I think that's really helpful. And it's been really interesting to see my work in this space, because, like, part of the funny thing for me personally is, like, I grew up, like, showing my art at, like, punk house shows and, like, not caring that much about the setting and the seriousness of my work. And so to see it in such a, like, a fancy, pristine space and seeing different ways that people are interacting it, like, there's a silliness in that as well too that I've really been enjoying. So yeah, I don't know. To me, that's really important, I think, to start conversations.
Yeah, I think it just kind of undermines expectations, but creates an avenue for, like, connection with your audience, but also in terms of technology work or work that incorporates new media. I think a lot of folks are sometimes scared of it or don't necessarily see it as art. So if you can bring in humor, it can be more approachable. I was also thinking of a question for you, Christine, and I apologize because I don't think we have a slide on this, but on your website, I saw that you had done an artist book that was plates with horror movies. Maybe you could explain it. Oh, is
It's
it on
actually,
it?
we have a slide. In fact,
I was very
I'm sorry to
prepared.
skip around.
Wait, there it is. Yeah.
So this is actually at IU. I participated in a book art show, so I called this a book, where Janna, my dear friend.
How dare you?
Helped me by coding a Markov chain poetry series where I combine scripts from horror movies with what to expect when you're expecting, because nothing is scarier than having a baby and being worried about messing it up. And there's so much culture around profiting off of that fear. And so I was really interested in that piece of my motherhood experience of just all that anxiety about messing him up.
I also just thought it was kind of funny, right? Like, it's funny to smash these things together. It's funny that I don't know which is which.
Yeah. Because they're both horrific.
Yes.
Yeah.
That it got at that, like, blurred line,
Yeah.
of, like, horror and humor.
Yeah. It was called Expect Horror. And so, I mean, you could write a book about raising a baby that's called Expect Horror.
Yeah.
A lot of projectile vomiting in both genres that I really related to.
Yeah. Unexpected fluids everywhere. Yeah.
We've gone somewhere. I want to bring us back to thinking about memory. This is a hard turn. Back to thinking about memory. For folks who maybe haven't seen it, Digital Sentiment Server is a computer that has its own server with 3D scans of heirlooms that have also been 3D printed. Maybe if either of you wanted to just give a quick description.
Sure. Yeah. So we made slides and then didn't use them. Do you want me to do it, or do you
I'll
want
finish my question once you're done.
Okay.
You do it.
Okay, cool. So, so this is the project that we were talking about earlier, where Christine was coming at it from like a 3D scanning heirlooms, physical objects perspective, and I was kind of coming at it from like a digital ephemera perspective. And so I was really interested in always like sharing digital knowledge, like how these systems work. Like I grew up in early internet days where like it wasn't very uncommon to like have your own server that you would like upkeep and like that kind of thing, or like code your own website and that stuff. So I was really interested in kind of creating an example of like how this type of personal digital archiving could be done in a way that was like really simple and easy to explain. And so we actually created a series of workshops, and we just did our first one at Louisiana State University. What was that? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're really tired.
We're really tired. But so I was really interested in creating these collaborative workshops to get people even just thinking about like how digital artifacts might manifest, like how to gather your digital artifacts and take them back, so you have ownership over like your ephemera from all of these platforms. And then Christine did a portion where she was taking people's family heirlooms in the gallery, right? You just did this workshop, if you want to talk about it.
So probably all of you or most of you have a smartphone with the capacity to do 3D scanning. It's become a lot more accessible and a lot more ubiquitous. And so, like Janna said, a big piece of this collaborative workshop project is about the democratization of technology and the decorporatization of your data. And so we are interested in giving people the tools to scan their objects. I come from a pretty persnickety family, and so if someone passes, people get real spicy about who gets what. And so I was also curious about how digitizing these things felt like sharing, but then also feels like an invitation for a new kind of fight, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But just that shift of digitizing.
Yeah, and trying to decide, like, does a thing still hold value after it's been digitized, or does it become something completely different? Like, it's more easily to like shareable to have a digital file than to like send somebody like this really precious heirloom through the mail or whatever. Like
Yeah.
you get it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I get it like that doesn't work, obviously. But also, does it feel as real, or like what happens when you shift something from like the physical space to the digital space? And so then we also experimented, and the things in the gallery are also, we experimented with like 3D printing them back out into physical space.
Yeah. So creating a space where people can then print them, so you can have them for your house, you know, like it becomes physical again, like Janna said. For the project, I printed them all in the same color, and there is some kind of fidelity loss with the scanner because you're just using your phone. It's not that great yet.
It's not NASA.
Yeah, we're not doing NASA here. And so it feels like the way that we describe our memories to other people, right? There's always some amount of translation and filtering and loss that happens. And so they're all printed at the same height, and there's kind of this homogenization because I don't think that anyone cares about your memories as much as you do, right? And so this kind of like, oh, you know, these are Christine's.
Yeah, like, does it matter to like see like the Miss Piggy figurine at its exact height
Yeah,
to anyone
exactly.
else but you? Yeah.
So I was thinking about this because I think heirlooms are really interesting objects because they attempt to combine the material and the intangible. So they're deeply personal, and yet the conceptual resonance within them might be limited to an individual for whom the object holds that meaning. So I was wondering how you navigate this like divide from the object and its aura, for lack of a better term, where many individuals will view the work, but not necessarily the background or the importance of it, or even the original object. Is it more about personal empowerment and creating a cross-generational understanding, a sort of digital archive of these objects, a familiarity between strangers across time of the importance of the object, or is it more so this experiment in when something loses its concept, is it still as real to you?
Yes.
All of the above.
Yeah,
It's really
I think part of it is the action of doing it. And it was kind of funny when I was scanning work for the show. I had this little side table that I put all the objects on. And so I'm crawling around with my phone in a circle. And there was something that felt really kind of ritualized about that. Yeah. You take photos all the way around using the app.
Yeah.
And so you circle it a few times. And so this deference that you're showing this thing that feels precious through this act of trying to maintain. In the show that we have in Baton Rouge, there's another piece I did about my cat, because I don't know, cat art is so bad and good at the same time. And you can't talk about the internet without talking about cats. And I have all of these thousands of pictures of my cats pre-kid. Have a kid, I have 0 pictures of my cat now. And so this idea of using these tools to capture moments and capturing moments as an act of care, as just something to think about, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, and like our show in Baton Rouge too is about like this concept of like digital abundance and like
Accumulation.
digital accumulation. Like when you have so much of something, like does it almost do the opposite of what you desire, right? Like, and I kind of was thinking about the same thing when I did the piece out there, the mediated memory piece, which is like on the 2 CRT TVs. It's my home videos that over the pandemic, as the tech person, I was asked to digitize all of our VHSs. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this. But that meant that I had to go through the process of digitizing these VHS tapes and figuring out how to do that. But also like what is lost and what's gained when something has been digitized was something that I was really thinking about. And like, what does it mean as humans? Like whenever there's a new technology, whether it was like writing or cave painting or whatever, like we're constantly mediating our ability to remember things through a new technology in a way that I found really interesting. And so I kind of view like the abundance of photos that I now have on my phone that I refuse to get rid of, because surely I'll go back and look for them, like as a prosthetic for my memory that can't possibly hold all of this stuff that I'm constantly trying to hold on to all the time. So yeah, I was really interested in that. And I think part of it too is just this concept of, for me anyway, like with these digitized artifacts, whether it's the digital ephemera, like communications between you and a loved one, like before they passed or whatever, who gets to decide in the future what is important for historians to have, right? Like who is defining what our history will be, and who owns all of this matter and all of this data? And like, is it less important that you existed or that you're like child's favorite robot or whatever? Like, is that not an important artifact? And also, who gets to decide? And I was thinking a lot about this because I'm really interested in it. I'm sure people have heard me talk about it before, but I'm obsessed with like old dead platforms on the internet and this concept of GeoCities, which used to be like this community of people online that was axed when Yahoo decided that it was no longer financially viable to run. And so we lost all of this digital history. And there were communities there that we'll never know about, except for a few people who decided to archive their stuff. And so I think about this a lot. Like if all of our stuff, all of our memories are owned by platforms who could axe them at any moment because they're no longer financially viable, then they get to decide what is important and what's not important. And I hate that. The end.
Done. No. I also feel like the act of keeping these memories and preserving them and preserving of familial history, preserving of heirlooms, it tends to be very gendered. I'm not saying that it's always, because I know that's not true, but
Yeah.
I do feel like there's certainly a gendered aspect to it.
There's a piece of it that is a piece that we've discussed a lot. When we wrote this paper about this project, we looked at scrapbooking and just this idea of the work of maintaining. And another thing that we've talked about is the experience of millennials who are far less centralized in family history.
Right. Like we all
we
have to
move.
move to find jobs and cheap housing and whatever we can scrap together. So like the reality of like staying in the same family unit and like the same space is so much more rare. And so like access to our family ties is also something that you're constantly having to negotiate. Like I need to move across the country for this job. What do I keep and what do I get rid of? And I have these conversations constantly with like, my partner's family, who is much more like object focused than my family is, but they're constantly trying to get us to like take stuff in. And it's like, we have a 500 square foot house. I cannot take these. Like there's no physical space for me to take this. And I can't buy another house. Like this is the house I have. So yeah, I don't know. It's like negotiating that is also interesting from like a class and generational perspective.
You're like thinking about an entire family as being object oriented.
Well, it's also really like we haven't really talked about this that much, but like I feel like Christine's family is very object oriented. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like my sculpture background comes into play here where I love things and I collect things and maybe I'll need this just in case.
Yeah.
And all of this crap, I've moved from Pennsylvania to Phoenix, Arizona, to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to Indiana, to Louisiana.
Got to follow the job.
Yeah.
Follow that paper.
And I bring all of this crap with me, and it's so heavy. And my husband and I have talked about, like, well, maybe we move to Germany and we'll be safe there, and our kid isn't going to have like a scary school situation. And so, but I have all this crap, and what am I going to do with it? So I started scanning it just in case, so I could keep it just in case.
Yeah. And my family is very much like the opposite. Like I think I was like weirdly, my family was just not really into like keeping family heirlooms. And so we really don't have anything like other than like weird little things that I guess I could keep. But like we're more interested in like artifacts that have touched people. Like my mom has my dad's mullet, like the ponytail in a braid. And like, she's like, I'll never get rid of it.
Jenna, don't worry. I keep hair too.
Oh, okay.
Please.
That's added to your thing.
Yeah.
So, but I'm like, that's like the one weird thing that I would be like, I mean, I guess I'll keep my dad's mullet. I don't know.
But you were racking your brains to think of the stuff that you could
Yeah.
scan for the project, whereas I had no trouble.
Yeah. Christine was like, don't you have anything? And I was like, no, I have hair. Like, I don't know. I can't really scan that. So yeah, my family was like really interested in like archiving things. Like we had so many VHS tapes and then like photos, but a lot of them are digital, but my dad runs his own server. So like we all have them like digitally. And so, yeah, like we don't really have like attachments to like the physical stuff, but I don't know if it's a class thing too. Cause like my family was like lower middle class. And so like the idea of like having like an antique anything is crazy to me. So I don't know. I don't know if that makes a difference.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I feel like, speaking of this role of gendered labor, labor is in both of your practices, but in different ways. And I'm wondering if you can speak a bit about how your practices also employ like a resistance to labor, a resistance to gendered labor as sort of a reclamation of the self.
Woof.
It's almost like a failed attempt, right? Because
I did so much labor.
yeah, Janna did so much labor for the show, and we try so hard all the time. But we are really aware. Well, last night when we were talking about this question, we were talking about our relationship and the idea that we both know, like, Janna works so hard, guys. and so
Christine works so hard and Kat works so hard.
Yes. And so Janna called me before the show and asked if I would print the 3D prints. And I was so touched that you would ask for help. And I was so stoked to help you. Yeah. And so there's this idea that, like, I don't know, helping the helpers. I don't know.
Yeah, like there's a care involved, I think.
Yeah.
And also like growing up in such a gendered space where like I grew up like with a brother and then like all of these male cousins and stuff. Like it was always upon me to do the like gendered labor. And so there was always this like weird part of me that enjoyed feeling like I was helping my mom, but also hating the fact that all of it fell on me in a very angry way of just like, well, everybody else is just sitting around and here I am doing all the dishes. And so I think there's like part of me that fights it, but I also have this like terrible like Midwestern, I don't know if it's like the German thing, I don't know, but I have like this terrible like Protestant work ethic where I'm just like, if I'm not working, like, and I think I learned this from like the women in my life as well, is it's just like, if you're not working, like, what are you? Like, you're
bad.
Yeah,
That's what you
like
are.
I'm a lazy
Bad.
jerk if I'm not doing anything. And so like that's also something that I'm constantly trying to negotiate in my work life as well. It's like, how do you step
I
away?
feel like it definitely comes through in your work about that, like, that fraught relationship with productivity as being related to self-worth. I also want to ask, you've talked a little bit about friendship and care that you have for one another. And what's it like navigating that in academia? We all know, I think, how it can be. I'm like tearing up thinking about this.
don't cry.
It can be so competitive
a
and
safe
so
space.
harsh.
Yes.
Even though we do care for each other and we
Yeah.
do want the best for one another. So how do you navigate that?
It's really easy to love Janna. we found each other at Indiana, and I think we just vibe and we think really similarly about the world. My favorite thing about Janna is she is the person who lives the most by her values of everyone that I know, and it's really
I'm gonna leave.
yeah. You're gonna storm out. Yeah. And so I think it's really important to have friends that also it's important to have friends, and it is
Period.
cool to have someone to talk to about these ideas that you can sometimes feel like a crazy person, where you're like, I feel like I work really hard, but then they keep asking me to do more stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And Janna's like, you do work hard.
you do work hard. Yeah. Well, and I think too, like part of it is just like, I think it's an act of resistance to be nice to each other, like especially in art spaces. Like the one advice, like the piece of advice I give to my students most frequently is like all of the career advancing, which is kind of a shitty way to think about it, but all of the opportunities that I've ever had in life, I think are just because I was nice. Like I was just like kind to the people who were helping me. And most of the time, like I get callbacks from people or like galleries will like hit me up just because they were like, I heard you were nice. And so I was like, I mean, I'll take it. Like I think like there's such a competitive I don't know, capitalist drive, especially right now. Like it's a really hard time to be in academia when all of our budgets are getting cut. Like, and the drive is to pit us against each other in order to like try and fight for the little resources that we have. And instead of doing that, like I would rather not. And so I think that's definitely a huge part of it for me, is just like I would rather just like be like, hey, we're in this together. So how can we like benefit each other while we're also
Totally.
doing this important work? Yeah.
I think we're big believers in rising tides lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And I think that's both like we would rather live that way than
I would
the
rather get
alternative.
fired and live like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it'd be really stressful and a big bummer
Yeah.
if we were backstabbed.
it's very lonely. Like you just almost cried this talk. Like it's a very lonely space to be in. And so I also find it really interesting because I feel like art academia in most schools, like public schools, has become like the only middle class jobs left as well, where like there's this expectation that everything's fancy, but it's not. And yeah, I'm just like, why live like that?
I feel like you saying I would prefer not to. It's like Bartleby the Scrivener, like form of care.
Yeah.
Existence. I love that. I also had asked both of you to prepare questions for one another. Were you able to do that? No.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like we just talk constantly.
Yeah, we talk constantly.
Yeah. I'm interested in like how you are navigating all of this like labor as a caretaker of like a 4-year-old while also navigating all of like the academic labor that you have to do, like as far as like teaching and that kind of thing, as well as like making work, and like what infrastructure do you think like would be helpful or like what is harmful?
Ooh.
That might be too much. I don't know.
I recently had a faculty retreat meeting where we have a new dean, and he was saying that everyone should be thinking 3 years in advance. And I got so stressed out. And so I was telling Janna, I want to make a CV of motherhood just because I'm busy. And I don't know how many other things that I can add. And so it's funny because you're asking like what would help, and I was like a babysitter, like I think a piece of that is that like millennials, not to keep harping on about being millennial, but we are often not living close to families, so childcare is really expensive, and navigating that and finding time and space to be a whole person in myself and not within the role of caretaker at all times, and having my brain divided in that way is tricky. And Christina's doing her best.
Same. That should be your show title.
Yeah, Christina's doing her best.
I love the CV of motherhood idea.
Yeah.
Would you like me to open it up?
Yeah.
Or does anyone have
Listen to us
questions for
ramble.
our artists today? Or I can also take a question, I guess.
So it's more commentary. I think the whole issue of being a woman, and for some women artists who are also mothers, but also play pivotal roles in their families and in their communities, so it isn't always identified through that way of being like a mom, although I happen to be one. They're 40 and 43, so, still being a mom.
Still a full-time job.
Still, I don't want to scare you, but. And I think I love the whole idea of like all those, flow, and the collaborativeness. I think some of what goes unspoken, because the productivity is so like visible, like either produced in work or in teaching X classes, or I've published X papers, but I think there's and now I'm starting to get another idea right now. Uh-oh, it's dangerous. But I'm thinking of what isn't seen, and that whole thing about productivity and capitalism. But there's times where so much is going on internally that isn't resulting in a piece or a paper or a whatever that's applicable to, way beyond academia, way beyond art, any other discipline. I think there's something that needs to be like saying the quiet part out loud about the times when things feel like I'm stuck, but maybe you're not really stuck because like I'm living and I'm experiencing even stuckness is something to feel. And so I wish we could create more space in the concept of labor or whatever, even memories really, of we're always at these developmental stages as artists, as moms, as people, as friends, and pay tribute to that more of what it means when I'm not showing something, when I'm not producing, that there's so much going on. Summer and I were talking about that before we came in, like, oh shit, I've got a new idea and I need to work with it. It needs to unfold or happen or be accidental or unaccidental, depending on how you look at it. So in just listening to you and maybe being a bit of, a few decades older and having remembered very much when my children were little, finding time, not being seen as an artist or being seen as a mother, whatever the world sees you, and how do we help fortify each other from within and during those times where things are not necessarily being produced, but so much is happening, even in the, stinky diaper stage or, whatever's going on. I worked 9-to-5 jobs for years before I went back and got my doctorate. And Jan and I talk about this too, like what burns in you that keeps you going when other people aren't even looking at you, paying attention to you.
We were just
caring
talking
about
about
what
that.
you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think this needs to be brought up to the light in the same way that the things we do that really shine about it. And that's great too, don't get me wrong. So just that's what I've been thinking a lot, and then what Summer and I were talking about before this session of how we need to pay tribute to that more, not romanticize it, but treat it as it is an important part of this path.
And not laziness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, I agree with you. It's important.
Yeah,
to
well, and I
rest.
was actually just talking about this because I feel like higher education, and particularly like art higher education, is kind of in a crisis at this moment of like we've been talking about this a lot, but about the differences between our two schools, like Louisiana State University versus Southern Maine, and like so many of our students have this expectation of our courses to be vocational, like this concept of art making as like a way of being alive and being human is almost completely lost. Like all of our students expect like that I am going to teach them something that's magically going to create a job for them that hasn't existed in like 100 years. And like, especially with like AI technologies and these things, like it's not a vocational school. Like don't pay thousands of dollars to go to school for a vocation that's not there for you. And so like negotiating the students who just want a job versus the students who have this drive in them has been really hard, and like trying to convince them like, as much as I want you here, like you really need to think about this logically, because like you don't do this for the glory or the money, because there is none. Like I do it because I love it, and I thought like if I'm not making stuff, like I'd rather not exist. So like there's just no me without making stuff.
Yeah, I tell my students all the time, I have a BFA in sculpture. I never thought I'd have a job that was doing art,
No, I thought I'd be bussing tables forever.
Yeah. And so I think that that drive, and it's also kind of, I think it's reflective of our devaluing of the humanities, right? This deep critical thinking is really important. And it's also a really nice way to live, right? To look at the world and be really curious about it. And so I hope that that's what we're helping our students do.
But yeah, the systems are making it difficult.
One thing that commentary also made me think about was how oftentimes when I say like, this is my big project and we're presenting it, we're at a reception, someone will come up to me and say, what's next?
Yeah,
What are you doing
always.
next? It's
Yeah.
it's a big thing in the arts to like keep working and producing. And I think it would behoove us to normalize like this. I'm taking my time. I'm figuring it out instead of always wanting to have an answer to that what's next question.
When I just had this conversation, because I've been asking everywhere I go, where I just was at Christine's classes as well, and I asked this question, but I've been asking my classes as well, like about their perspectives about what the role of an artist is. I'm like, why? Like, what do you think the function of being an artist is? And their answers are concerning and whack to me. But like, for me personally, like I see my job as an artist, whatever that means, as like being somebody who's synthesizing the culture that I'm living in. Like the way I communicate and the mediums that I use are a product of my time and my place, which is why I make weird internet stuff, because that's the language of right now. And so like I see myself as a synthesizer of these ideas, things smashing together that don't necessarily feel like they should smash together. And the fact that a lot of students are coming to me and saying like entertainment is the point of art making. And I was just like,
Yeah.
Get you a fainting couch.
no, I need a fainting couch and a fan.
Because I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has anything. Kim?
Yeah, I love that you were talking about silliness and also the kind of the banter back and forth is just wonderful example of that, I think, too. And it's really refreshing in contemporary art to see silliness because, I mean, you see humor, but or you see kind of a deliberate attempts to be funny, and silly is extemporaneous and ephemeral, right? But I wondered about, silly. It seems to me that using silly is kind of innocuous and a way to kind of engage the viewer to get to a deeper meaning. Like, you're not hitting them over the head with an idea or a point, but kind of getting them into it by being kind of confrontational and kind of silly. And I wondered if you could kind of speak to that. Is that a conscious intention? It seems like that just more kind of exudes from who you are and the way your practice is.
Our times.
Yeah, we're just so funny.
It's kind of the way that you phrased your question as silliness is non-confrontational. I was like, ooh, it's probably gendered.
I was gonna say, I don't know, like, because I feel like I am very, I don't know, like, I don't know how to, like, words are important to me and they're kind of gone at this moment. But, like, I see seriousness in my silliness, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, kind of what you were saying. Like, even though I'm making stuff that is silly and, like, it is, like, I see it as critical silliness, like we were talking about earlier, right? Like, just because something's silly doesn't mean that it can't be deep. And, like, I do, like, all of my work is very deeply entrenched in a lot of like digital humanities research. But that doesn't mean that the end result has to be something that's like, I don't know.
A bummer.
Yeah. Like, we have enough bummers. The world is a bummer, okay?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm bummed out all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think the things that I want to make, I just don't want to bum myself out.
oh, that's
So,
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like the absurdity of being alive right now is like a
Yeah.
perfect time for silliness.
We went to a conference over the summer, and I was telling Janna, never before has Dadaism made so much sense to me. Right? Like,
I'm like, wait.
yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff's crazy.
Very much agree.
Yeah.
On that note, I was just thinking of wanting to thank everybody for coming today and for also
Thank you,
seeing-
Kat.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Kat.
for seeing the inaugural exhibition here. Janna Ahrndt Does Not Dream of Labor. My goal with this gallery is to have work that students respond to, like in your body, that you really feel it. And I think not only that Janna and Christine's work does this, that there's interactivity, there's the need to navigate around it, to engage with it, to get lower, to see some things, to get higher. But also, we're fortunate to have Summer Hart in the audience, who made the piece Out in May Back by October, which marks the resumption of the university's acquisitions program. And I think that piece also really speaks to belonging, to place, to themes of what it means to be here in Maine. If you don't know the story behind it, I encourage you to scan the QR code. I'm not going to go in depth here, but I just want to say thank you so much to the artists who are here today, because all of you are making this space a wonderful place for our students to begin to engage with art and to see it in a different way, to reimagine what art can be and what it can do and what it can communicate. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kat.